Hi everyone! Before we begin, let me tell you that you can find a lot of videos about adventure games in my channel, like the full history videos of iconic franchises like Quest for Glory, Space Quest, King's Quest, Gabriel Knight and more, alongside a 2-hour documentary on the history of the genre with the rise and fall of the adventure games. If you like the content of my channel, please consider supporting it by subscribing and turning on the notifications for it. Batman Returns is a 1992 American superhero film directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne and Batman, alongside Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Christopher Walken. It is the sequel to the 1989 film Batman and the second installment of Warner Bros. Initial Batman film series that continued with Batman Forever in 1995 and Batman and Robin of 1997, the movie that both critics, fans and actors want to forget. Batman Returns was released on June of 1992 and it grossed more than 260 million worldwide on a total budget of 80 million and received mostly positive reviews. While critics praised its action sequences, performances, Danny Elfman's score, effects and villains, its PG-13 rating was criticized due to the dark tone and violence, as this was the era before Christopher Nolan's take on The Dark Knight. The film was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Visual Effects and Best Makeup, as well as 2 BAFTA Awards. The success of Batman Returns spawned its own merchandising empire. The video games industry also wanted to capitalize on the blockbuster movie success, and companies lined up at the Warner Bros. Headquarters to get the rights for producing their own take of new Batman video games across all platforms. The Japanese Konami was the company that finally secured those rights and went straight to doing what they did best at the time: develop video games based on Batman Returns for the 2 major console rivals of the time, Nintendo and Sega. There is also an Atari Lynx version published by Atari Corporation and an announced Atari ST game that was never developed. For the Sega consoles, the games were developed in-house by Sega teams under license from Konami. The Sega Genesis or Mega Drive and Sega CD versions of the game are more or less identical, as they both are 2-dimensional platforming games similar to Sega's previous movie-based Batman game. The Genesis version of the game was released on December of 1992, during the same time Echo the Dolphin was released for the Sega Genesis as well. The CD version of the game features a number of 3D racing levels that took advantage of the graphics hardware provided by the Sega CD unit, plus improved music in the form of CD audio with a number of animations featuring original artwork. While different versions follow the movie's plot from start to finish, the Sega games start after the Penguin kills the Ice Princess and frames Batman for killing her, as shown in the game's introduction. The Sega Master System and Sega Game Gear versions of the game are side-scrolling platform games also. However, the titles were created independently of the 16-bit versions. These versions featured a unique branched level system, allowing the players to choose from an easy and difficult route. The latter typically forced players to use rope swinging to navigate over large floorless areas in these versions of levels. Konami developed the games for the Nintendo consoles. The Super Nintendo version of the game was released in 1993. It is fundamentally a left-to-right scrolling fighter beat-em-up, a genre that was featured heavily on the console at the time. The gameplay and graphics are very similar to the Final Fight games. The game takes the player through 7 scenes featured in the film. Various members of the Red Triangle Circus Gang attack Batman throughout the game. Batman has a number of weapons and moves at his disposal, including the Batarang. Each level ends with a boss character which requires a little more effort and strategy to defeat. A number of levels are 2-dimensional platform levels, as opposed to the majority of the pseudo 3D levels where freer movement is permitted. The 5th level consists of driving the Batmobile in a chase scene where Batman must chase bikers and a heavily armed van from the gang. In order to defeat them, the Batmobile uses a machine gun. The NES version of the game is also a beat 'em up, but closer or more similar in style and gameplay to the Double Dragon series. The player has only one life bar, which can be expanded through health packs. It implements a password save system. Of special note are the two side-scrolling racing levels in which the player controls the Batmobile and the Bat-Ski boat. For the PC version of the game, Konami took a totally different direction, and instead of developing a port of the console games, they decided to create something completely different. The DOS game Batman Returns is the key topic of this video. Batman Returns is a DOS point-and-click adventure game developed by Park Place, co-published by Spirit of Discovery and distributed by Konami. Due to the open-ended nature of the game, it was delayed during development and released in December of 1992 rather than June. Based on the movie of the same name, the game has a stronger focus on detective work than most Batman games. Frigid winter winds swept over an already chilled Gotham City. Random street crimes were running at an all-time high despite the holidays. Down below, in the city's frozen sewers, Oswald Cobblepot, known as the Penguin, planned more mayhem and schemed the takeover of the frightened metropolis. His loyal army of missile-packing Penguin commandos and the bizarre Red Triangle Circus gang are energized by the evil genius of the web-footed orphan. A desperate call to Batman goes up. The game is played from a third-person perspective. The goal is to prevent Penguin from becoming mayor or destroying the city. This is done over 9 timed nights where Batman can operate. The utility belt is the closest to an icon interface for this game. Players can select what tools go in our belt before they leave the Batcave. Tools include multiple types of batarangs, grappling guns, and even a portable document scanner. Batman's base is the Batcave, where he can swap suits that are damaged and select what to put in his utility belt. There is also a computer that the player can use to analyze evidence, watch the news, and search a database of Gotham citizens. There are also 2 sets of interfaces while Batman is visiting locations of the game: a searching interface that allows him to look for clues, and a combat interface where Batman fights his enemies. Batman does all the fighting himself, but players can specify how hard they want him to battle: easy, normal, or fierce. The story takes place across 9 days, and if you do not gather enough evidence to reveal the Penguin's plans in time, it's game over time. You can move over freely between locations in the Batmobile 2, and some events will only trigger at certain times of day. Bill Kunkel was in charge of the game's development at Park Place. He visited the sets and was given a copy of the Daniel Waters script. In many ways, this was the perfect project for his background. He had written comic books, developed a Superman game, and had experience in adventure game development like the Omnicron Conspiracy of 1989. When news broke that Konami was shopping out developers for games based on the Batman sequel, Kunkel played his contacts and discovered that the gig for the DOS version of the game had been given to a development house that he had connections to, Park Place. He pitched himself and his firm to design the game, a pitch that he landed based on his excellent resume for the job. The graphics are hand-drawn, typical of the era, and the rotoscoping technique has been used for most of the animations. As many cool ideas as Batman Returns has, it's a pretty terrible game. It's never clear what you are supposed to be doing or how to trigger the next event, and the combat is chaotic. When combat happens, you just click a button representing one of 3 fighting styles: easy, normal, and fierce, and watch Batman beat them up. It is also pretty short, taking maybe less than 2 hours to finish if you don't get too stuck. As a result, the game was received poorly by critics and fans alike. The sales were abysmal and prevented Konami from messing with the adventure game genre again. However, this game is treated today as a curiosity, and credits should definitely go to Konami for trying something new and out of the box for its standards. That was the story of the Batman Returns adventure game, a game developed by a very promising studio and distributed by one of the biggest players in the industry that unfortunately missed its target and failed to become another iconic game in a multi-million franchise. If you like my content, do not forget to support the channel by subscribing and pressing the like button. You can also consider supporting the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Patrons get to choose the topic of the next video, receive exclusive updates, and their names will be listed in the credits of every new upload. Thank you all for watching.